So everybody that's listening to us, whether you're on the radio or on the podcasting, we firstly thank you for listening to the program. If you're listening to us on the podcasting sites, like, subscribe, share. We have a very good guest today, former NSA agent Bruce Brill. He does have a book out, Deceit of an Ally, a memoir of military anti-Semitic NSA secret Jew room and Yom Kippur War teachery. So there's a lot there to get. We're going to put the description, if you're listening to us online, in the description box, the link to get the book on Amazon, or we do hope you get it at your local bookstore in general, because we like to support small businesses in general, not the big businesses. But enough of my gobbledygook nonsense. Bruce, thanks so much for coming on. First of all, it's an honor to meet you, and honor to hear to your story about many different things, not just what's going on in the NSA, but also what's happening in Israel, the Yom Kippur War, the Palestinian conflict right now. There's a lot to tap into. We're not going to get into it all today, but we will do a second interview. But Bruce, thanks so much.
A pleasure.
All right, so let's kick this around. So you are in Israel, for everybody that's listening and watching this right now. As a person that was an American citizen that worked in the NSA, what made you want to move to Israel? Let's start off with that.
Okay. First, a correction. You said that I was an American citizen. I still am an American citizen.
Right, true. Good point.
Okay. And I'm a proud American citizen. In fact, I posted an American flag up behind me just to show that I love America.
Right.
And much of what goes on in the name of America is sometimes saddens me.
Me
because
too.
Right, you too. Okay. So, yes, I've been living in Israel now for over 45 years. As proof that I love America, I enlisted in the American Army for 4 years. I enlisted for 4 years, and just to clarify, they gave us a year early out. So I served for 3 years active, but I enlisted for 4. On the first day of the Yom Kippur War, on October 6, 1973, from listening to live communication from the battlefront, I learned that the Israelis were caught with their pants down. And this surprised me. And the reason it surprised me is because we at the agency, we knew that Syria and Egypt were going to attack Israel. We knew this definitively. We knew this days in advance. And we knew on what day the attack would begin. And that the Israeli soldiers on the front line didn't know suggested that somehow we didn't get the intelligence to our allies. What I learned subsequently, 6 years ago, when I met with the head of Israeli military intelligence, was that he received a false intelligence from his American colleagues before the war began. Of course, I didn't know that 50 years ago. I just learned that 6 years ago. But what I knew 50 years ago was enough to make me decide that I wanted to come to Israel. So it was like an epiphany at that moment on the first day of the Yom Kippur War.
And I want to tap on that, and I want to get into the NSA and your job there and all the nits and crannies there. But let's tap on what you just stated, because it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously you're there, I'm not. You've seen what's happened in 1973. I wasn't even born then. in what's going on now. But it does seem like there's a lot of similarities from 1973 to 2023 on in October when the attack happened. Netanyahu's people were against him. They were protesting him. There was talks even by a couple Israelis that were involved in the negotiations that, and again, we're just stating this from people that we've spoke to. This is not information that I stand by, but that these Israelis that were working in the government, that were working, saying that they kind of knew what was going to happen. So do you feel like there are those similarities between 1973 and 2023 where the government kind of let this happen? There seems like there's a lot of and I'm trying to think of the correct word to use it with the terminology here. There's a lot of those similarities with this going on.
It's a hell of a lot of similarities. And I'll give you examples. First of all, the Israelis had no shortage of intelligence information that the Arabs were about to attack and the attack was imminent. And this I've confirmed with Israelis firsthand back 50 years ago. Yet they didn't do anything. And the reason is that this Eli Ze'ira, General Eli Ze'ira, the head of Israeli military intelligence, got assurances from his American counterparts that the Arabs were not going to attack. When we knew the opposite. We knew, as I said, days in advance that they were going to attack, and they were going to attack on Saturday, Yom Kippur, October 6th. We knew this. I'm living evidence, I'm living proof that this is true. And what happened also was that Moshe Dayan, in a protocol that was only released from Israeli Defense Forces archives on June 6, 2022, that he received an intelligence assessment, you're sitting down, 12 hours before the attack actually began, that the Arabs are not going to attack, completely confirming what Eli Ze'ira confided in me when I visited him at his home 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And even just going deeper into the similarities, and I went to college in a very Jewish area, as you probably know, in Palm Beach County. And it's very, when I talk about this, when I've been down there about, and again, this doesn't mean that you're anti-Israel at all. We're just going by the facts here. When we look at these two events that particularly happened, it just seems, go ahead. It just seems like they're very, very similar.
Okay,
And
there are surface similarities. The fact that it happened on a Jewish holiday, on a Shabbat, on a Saturday, almost 50 years to the day, one day off, October 6th, October 7th. But the main similarities is that Israel had all kinds of intelligence 50 years ago, for sure, but didn't act. And this year, well, last year, October 7th, also Israel had all kinds, but didn't act again. And of course, my suspicion, because I wrote this book on it, by the way, can you see?
Yes.
You can see everything.
Yes.
The fact that we knew and we passed misinformation to the Israelis, of course, I suspect that maybe the same thing happened. It's not just the similarity that it almost fell on the same day 50 years hence, but the fact that we knew in American intelligence. So now my assumptions would be, number one, that just as 50 years ago, we in American intelligence knew definitively that the Arabs were going to attack. We knew it days in advance. I assume that today, US intelligence is so strong that they would have known in advance that an attack was going to happen. And just as 50 years ago, we knew on the day that the attack would happen. I believe that this past year, they knew that the attack would happen on October 7th. This is an assumption, but I
Yeah,
think
we
it's a
can't say
very...
this for sure, Bruce, but can we just kind of think about this and say that, you know, Israel and the United States, and I think Israel personally has the best spies in the world, US probably second, regardless of what order we want to put them in, they are in the top two. With that said, does it look like there's kind of some collusion maybe on the US side and also some people on the Israeli side to let these things happen? I mean, even going back to 9/11, we saw with US intelligence that they had many, many warnings, even going back to August of 2001. They were getting those warnings that there were hijackers training to crash planes into buildings. You know, it's very suspect that these warnings come out, but no one acts on it. And that's why, again, it looks to me that there's people in both of our governments, the US and Israel, that are colluding with each other to push this information under the rug so it can happen. And then the chips fall where they may, and people make money off these wars and types of events.
Um, Obviously, to me, there was something smelly from the first day of the Yom Kippur War. There was something smelly. How did we know definitively? And the Israelis seem to not have known. But
Sure.
in all of my research, I discovered that, yes, indeed, they did know. They did know, but they were duped into not acting. Why were they duped into not acting? There are two theories. One is that they were actually duped, that the American intelligence assessments that was delivered to Moshe Dayan, who was the defense minister, and Eli Ze'ira, the head of Israeli military intelligence, were false assessments, and they relied on them. Or maybe they somehow were in cahoots with powers that be that wanted the Israelis to be caught with their pants down. And so there are two theories. And one of them is presented in my book, and that's not a theory, that's fact. And the other is a theory in this book, the Kissinger connection. I'm going to be publishing this book shortly, so keep your eyes open for the Kissinger connection, in which the author, not me, another man, it's another story, the author's life was threatened when he wrote this book 45 years ago, in 1978. He was threatened not to distribute his book, that his life was threatened. So only now he gave me permission to have his book translated into English and published. What does he say? He says that Kissinger arranged to have an orchestrated war to give the Arabs a victory, quote unquote. And why did he do that? Because Sadat and Assad, the leaders of Egypt and Syria, respectively, at that time said they would not receive back land that was captured and occupied by Israel as a gift. They would only receive the land back. What was taken by force will be returned by force. So he had to arrange an orchestrated war. And Kissinger got the cooperation of the Soviet Union at the time. Of course, he got the cooperation of Sadat and Assad. You're sitting down. He also got the cooperation of Moshe Dayan and Golda Meir. That's what his claim is. And it's a very strong case. But it doesn't necessarily conflict with my story. In fact, people say that are well studied in both these theories that one complements the other.
I want to get into, and we kind of talked about the book in general, Bruce, but let's get into why you wanted to write this book, because it seems like a lot of people don't know the history of this country, the history of the world in general. They're not teaching it in schools here. I think that this book is important because you're teaching a lot of people that weren't alive at this time not to hopefully repeat history. But what made you personally want to write that book?
Okay, so it's been troubling me, from the first day of the Yom Kippur War, when the Israelis on the front line, who should have known, didn't know, that somehow we didn't get the intelligence to our allies. It troubled me all these years, all these decades. And I finally decided that I had to pick up a phone and call the head of Israeli military intelligence, who failed. I had a story to tell him that we knew, and he had to hear my story, and I wanted to hear his story. At the time, he was almost 90 years old. Mm-hmm. And if I another hour or another day or month or year, he might not be around for me to tap him on the shoulder. He invited me to his home twice. The first time was on July 4th. I remember that date, July 4th, 6 years ago. And he confided in me that he received an intelligence assessment from his colleagues, his American general colleagues. Don't worry, the Arabs are not going to attack. And I told him, I was a specialist fourth class. That's a very low rank. I mean, it sounds impressive, specialist, but it's a very low rank. I said, I'm sitting across the kitchen table from you, a general, the head of Israeli military intelligence. You believed the Arabs were not going to attack. You're sitting across from me, and I knew that they were going to attack. How do you explain it? I said, apparently, your American general colleagues duped you. He said, no. They loved Israel, and they were faithful generals, and all of them gentlemen, and he would put his life in their hands. So I said, if that's true, then they were duped. And so I wrote an op-ed article about my visit to Eli Zaira, and I took it to a prestigious daily Hebrew newspaper. And the editor asked me, did you record him? Because what you're writing here is explosive. And I said, no, I didn't record him. He said, did you have a witness with you? I said, I'm sorry, I didn't have a witness either. He handed me back the explosive op-ed, and he said, no one will believe you. So at that point, when I told this story to people in the know, they said, Bruce, you've got to write a book. Yeah. And that's what inspired me to spend close to 4 years writing and researching and rewriting and editing and having it translated into Hebrew.
Yeah.
And sharing the truth with the Israeli public and the English-speaking public.
All right, listen, I said it's important because people need to know the facts. Even though this is the past, again, if we don't know what happened in the past, we're doomed to repeat it. And unfortunately,
We
we're
might
repeating
have.
a we're repeating a lot of past events right now, and probably will happen in the future that we don't even know yet. I want to get into this, but everybody that's listening again, Bruce Brill, I do want to talk about this, Bruce, because just kind of going back into your days in the NSA, because we did get some audience questions about this. So let's tap into this. So, can you talk about your well, you have to edit that out. I was fumbled with that word. Bruce, can we talk about your specific job in the NSA?
We can't, because I can't tell you about it. It was secret. But I can tell you this about it. I think that being probably the only Jew boy in uniform in G6, G6 was the section of NSA that targeted the Middle East.
Okay.
And I believe, thinking back, recalling, I don't believe that there was another Jew in uniform in G6. Wow. I know that there were other Jews, there were two other Jews that worked in the Hebrew section, civilians. One was the assistant head of the department, a fellow who converted to Judaism. And then there was also an Orthodox Jewish girl that would commute from Pikesville, out in a suburb of Baltimore, an Orthodox Jewish girl. So it wasn't like we spied on Israel. It was more like collecting signal intelligence that dealt with Israel.
So
There's
what
an
years are we
Arabic.
talking about as far as you worked with the NSA, as far as the
I
years?
was there 72 to 74.
Okay.
I was only there those 3 years,
Right.
but it was at a critical time, a critical moment. God put me in that critical place at that critical time, probably the only Jew in uniform. I'd be happy to be corrected if there's some other Jew who was in uniform during those years in 72. I would be happy to hear from him or her. But I think I might have been the only Jew boy. And I was given a job that in 2020 hindsight, maybe they were giving me a marginal job that maybe took me a half hour a day to do. And I had to be there 9 hours a day in uniform. And my supervisor said, what you need to do is look busy for the rest of those 8.5 hours. He said, mess up your desk, take some papers and scatter them around on your desk. So I think the American taxpayer should be made aware that there's some inefficiency going on in NSA. But
not just the NSA, but many other
many other government agencies, I'm
agencies.
sure.
Yeah. So yeah.
But anyway, I had to fill, say, 8 hours or so with something to keep you from going insane. And so, of course, there were a lot of material, background material that you had to read to give you a broad perspective of what's going on in the Middle East, history and current events, and intelligence reports that were circulated on an almost daily basis throughout G6. And also, they allowed me to begin learning Hebrew. And so that filled up my days at NSA. And thanks to my learning Hebrew, I was given a special job to be a signal monitor on the first days of the Yom Kippur War because I could gist both Arabic and Hebrew. And so that's why I had this epiphany. It was like an epiphany on the first day of the Yom Kippur War when I was so surprised that the Israelis on the front line were surprised. I was surprised that they were surprised because they should have known. How did they get caught with their pants down?
Right. I want to get into this because we have we're running out of time. I want to get into these last few questions, just hitting on two audience questions in general, Bruce. So, a lot of Americans are worried about national security. They're worried about, and we saw this after 9/11. So let's kind of start there and kind of go into this because you were there for 3 years. I'm sure you saw things. And obviously, we're not going to go too deep in depth because, it was a national security job. I know you can't speak on everything you saw and stuff like that, but just kind of a generalization. So the question kind of is here, as far as the audience question, is after 9/11, we saw the ramp up of the NSA, kind of a police state in this country in general. So a lot of Americans are worried about that. Should they be worried about this kind of police state being ramped up in the country now, where, especially with technology, there's so much tracking, whether it's your cell phone, who you're talking to, where you are, what websites you're viewing, rather, what you're buying, the list goes on and on.
Right. So I have to tell you that one of the things that I discovered while I was working there, and you can see this in the subtitle of my book, NSA's Secret Jew Room.
Right.
So it's an absolute misnomer, according to John Loftus, a researcher about this. Why? Because Jews only not allowed entrance into the Jew room. They're not even allowed to know that such a room exists. And the second reason it's a misnomer is because it's not one room. It's rooms, plural. And they work against Israel and they work against American Jews. So I recommend to all your listeners to grab a hold of a book written by John Loftus, The Secret War Against the Jews. Buy that after you get my book, Deceit of an Ally, of course, in which John Loftus talks about this Jew room, which even as a Jew, I discovered while I was working there. How did I discover? It was, again, finger of God incidents. The head of the Hebrew division at a social event got drunk. And his conscience was bothering him, I'm sure. And when the alcohol goes in, the truth comes out.
Right.
He confided in me that there are rooms in NSA that you can't get because you're a Jew. Now, these rooms are taxpayer funded. They're secret within the agency. You hear of the deep state.
Yeah.
If there's a deep state, and we know there is, this is a very deep state. Yeah. Because it's inside the bowels of the intelligence community, a secure community. And they're secret within the secret intelligence community. Taxpayer funded and unmonitorable. Maybe the president of the United States didn't even know of the existence of these chambers. It could be. In fact, that would be my assumption, that maybe the president of the United States didn't even know about the goings on that are anti-American because they work against stated American public policy. We were allies of Israel, and they not only suppressed the intelligence that we should have gotten to the Israelis, but they corrupted the intelligence assessments, and we passed false, corrupted intelligence assessments to our allies. This is in contradistinction to American foreign policy. What could be more un-American than that?
Bruce, just a follow-up, because we always hear in the media that the Jews run the world, the Jews run the United States.
I
We
wish.
also we
Somebody
also
forgot to tell me that.
we also hear that AIPAC is running the government. I'm sure you know what AIPAC is, of course. So is that kind of work, which you just stated, it seems like it's working against that thought process that the Jews are running the country, AIPAC is running the country, and Jewish policy is American policy, when you're saying that the NSA has these rooms that are pushed against people that are American of Jewish descent and Israel in general. So is this like a double-edged sword? What should we believe? Yeah.
Well, I wish someone had let me in on, this quote, truth, unquote, because I'd love to benefit from some of the privileges that I'm
I'm sure
supposedly.
you've heard the talking points about Jewish people around in this country and around the world. So
I can give you a personal anecdote. A personal anecdote. I was riding my motorcycle back in what year would it have been? 69, maybe, when the first men landed on the moon?
yeah, right.
Yeah. So I was riding back through a place in Wisconsin,
Okay.
and a local family invited me to come and watch the landing on television that night. People I didn't know, lovely Americans. And so I said, you know what? I have some time. I'd like to work in your lumber yard. They had a lumber yard. They said, you don't have to repay us. And I said, oh, I would like to. I would like to get the experience. So I was working for free, kind of to repay their generosity and hospitality. And I was working with an old timer, an American old timer. And he was talking all kinds of philosophy. And he eventually got to the Jews. And he said, just what you're saying, those Jews, they pool their resources and they send their kids to college, and they get good jobs and they get good paying and they control the world. And they wouldn't do what you're doing. You're working here for free. You'd never see a Jew working for free. So I stopped working and I just stood there and I went like, do young people know what this means?
I do, but probably not many others.
Okay, it means shame, 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 shame on you. Shame, shame. So he saw me doing this and he said, and he got confused. He said, what? Are you a? I said, yeah, I'm a Jew. So he says, well, it's only them dark ones.
No, well, that's still the thought process going around. I do think that the media does play into this some ways, especially with the anti-Semitic talk now with that Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the stuff that's being pushed around college campuses, anti-Israel is running wild right now. So let's kind of end on that topic. Are you worried about this anti-Israel, anti-Jew sentiment that's not only in this country, but it's being pushed around the world? Again, we do have sympathy for people that are Palestinian that passed away. This is a war against Hamas, not the Palestinian people.
Yeah, of course. Actually, the lady who I'm a guest of here had a radio show, and she's an expert on particularly that topic. You
Sure.
should get to interview her. I'll have
Yeah,
you
yeah,
meet
for
her.
sure. Definitely give her my con.
Um, but yeah, been a lot of funding, particularly from Qatar, to
Mm,
colleges and
right.
universities throughout America. And they've been for decades now, several decades, not a whole lot of time, not maybe 10 or 20 years, they've been funding colleges to get on their staff anti-Israel staff and creating an environment that's definitely anti-Israel and anti-Jewish in general. And the irony of it is that very often some of the liberal Jews that are on college campuses become part of the anti-Israel movement. It's there are a lot of ironies that are going on today. It seems like the world maybe is turned upside down on its head.
I agree.
Those people, those Israelis and Jews that were attacked on October 7th were mostly leftists,
Mm,
Peace Now type, that were anti-Jewish settlement in
mm,
Judea and Samaria that the media already has been calling by wrong names. They call Judea the West Bank. How can you call it Judea? Because Judea has a meaning. It means the land of the Jews. And that's where I live. I live in the heart of Judea, the land of the Jews. But the West Bank terminology doesn't give credence to the fact that I'm not a settler, I'm a resettler, because my ancestors came from the heart of the land of the Jews.
yeah. Look at people don't want to learn history. They believe everything that's on television. They believe everything that their teacher said. They don't read books. They don't look into issues with an open mind. That's just the way the cookie crumbles now. It's totally sad. And the media is in the business to drive people apart, put wedges between people, and not look at things on both sides, issues on both sides, excuse me. So that's the problem with our society. That's a whole different different talk, another topic about that. I know you
I
want to say something, Bruce, so I'll shut up and let you talk.
Now I wanted to say a couple things.
Sure.
Um, I don't know if your readers can read this page, but my book has the unique distinction of having been approved for publication twice by the Pentagon
Oh, wow.
to show that I had no qualms about sharing my disclosures with the folks in the Pentagon. And their reviews, the first review was 4-month review, and they required two things. One, that I redact sections of my
Right.
book, and the other demand was that I don't add one word of new content. And after they approved it for publication the first time, there were several items that I wanted to add. So I had to send it back to them for an additional review. And it was approved twice
Wow.
for publication.
So you know it's
Yeah,
legit.
right. So, even though the title sounds anti-American, it's anything but anti-American.
Right.
It's what I call anti-American because it fingers these unmonitorable taxpayer-funded chambers within the intelligence community that work against American policy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really horrific what you've just stated throughout the interview, and I hope people, when they listen to this, they really come into this with an open mind and look at our government, look at Israel, in a different way than they did before they listened to this interview. Last question. We've talked about a lot of different things, Bruce. Obviously, the book and everything else in the kitchen sink. Again, we're going to have you on to discuss many other things as
Okay.
time goes on. But what do you hope people learn mostly from our conversation today?
Okay, that there actually is a deep state.
Right.
There actually was, and maybe still is, a Jew room within the agencies, the intelligence agencies. And the reason I use plural when I say that is that's what John Loftus uh, brings to the table, because he was in contact with members of the Jew room. And it's not just in NSA, it was interagency. And I wanted to know, does the Jew room still exist? And what I did was I took a deep breath in 1993, 20 years after the Yom Kippur War, and I wrote a letter to the security chief of NSA, and I asked him, does the policy of maintaining rooms within NSA that are off limits to Jews, does this policy still exist? And he didn't answer. So then in 1994, a year later, I said, you didn't answer, which suggests an answer. Can you answer? Does the policy of maintaining rooms within NSA off limits to Jews still exist? Again, no answer. John Loftus's book came out in 96, 2 years later, and the Jew room still existed then. So now it comes time that I want to publish my book with my disclosures. Does the Jew room still exist? And my congressman, my former congressman, because I relocated my residence from the first California congressional district to Florida's 11th congressional district.
Yeah.
My congressman then inquired, and he said, the Jew room no longer exists from his sources. So I said, that's very nice. When was it dismantled? When was it closed? And can you give me proof? Even though I just said I'm from California and now I have residence in Florida, I said, I'm from Missouri. Show me that the Jew room doesn't exist today.
Nothing.
He couldn't. But at least he confirmed that the Jew room did exist. I mean, that for sure it did.
But it still could exist.
It could still be. And I smell that it might. I mean, after seeing what happened on October 7th, it smells so similar to what happened on October 6th.
Yeah.
50 years before.
Do you feel like, and I know we're going to close right there, but I just a follow up quickly. Do you feel like people in America and people in Israel kind of that are in the know, that follow the news, that are maybe well read, kind of see between the lines, see 1973, see 2023, and they're like, this seems like there's more to this than just some attack?
It depends on what age you do your survey on. It seems like college kids age.
Listen, I was a college kid not that long ago. I was very much brainwashed. I will come out and say this.
That way.
I you know,
but I also think that people are waking up. I hope.
Right.
You know, I hope that people are waking up.
It took what happened in 2020 for me to really wake up and see what the hell is going on in this country, around the world, and doing these interviews with people that are in the know and hearing what they're saying. And again, I interviewed a person that was involved with the hostages in 2023 in Israel. And he kind of said, listen, there was a lot more to this than meets the eye. And basically saying a lot of similarities to what you stated throughout the program. This is somebody that was involved in the hostage negotiations, not just somebody that was watching the news on TV. So, and he was down there where you are
Look,
involved.
another similarity, Rob, is that back in 1973, if that war was supposed to be a staged war, the losses were thought of as a certain price that Israel had to pay. But the price wasn't in the dozens or hundreds of casualties. It was in the thousands of casualties. It exceeded what anyone might have been thinking about. And same thing with this. No one thought, if they were going to allow such a thing to happen, that it would evolve in the scale that it did. I mean, it was tremendous loss. Nobody could have possibly thought to allow something like this to happen to the degree that it did. No one.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, for people listening, Bruce Brill, former NSA agent, the book is Deceit of an Ally. Definitely get it at your local bookstore. Again, we push that first for small businesses, but you can also get it at Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million, and also on Amazon.com. Bruce, anywhere else people can find you? Any other books you have you want to tease? I know you have the new book coming out. We'll definitely do an interview on that, but anything else?
I think that's it. I want to get the truth out. I didn't write the book to make money,
Right.
in spite of the fact that I'm Jewish. I wrote the book to get the truth out. And believe me, I don't even know how many of the books were sold on Amazon.
No.
I haven't checked. I don't know. So I don't know how much moolah this book might have made me. I'm really seriously interested in getting the truth out, and I thank you so much for giving me a venue to do that.
Well, we're gonna have you on again, and between us, Amazon doesn't pay that well to books sold, from what I've heard from many other people. So don't expect too much out of that. But anyways, we'll move forward. Again, Bruce Brill, thanks so much for coming on. And again, for people listening, it is The Deceit of an Ally. Definitely get the book if you can. Bruce Brill, thanks so much.
Thank you, Rob.